Okay, so today I want to talk about identity because identity is such a fragile thing, right? Like when you're young, you start figuring out all of these lines and boxes for yourself of who you are, the kind of person you'll be, the kind of person you won't be. At least for me, like seeing certain relatives of mine or watching certain movies, I'd be like, oh, I'm never going to be like that. I'm never going to do something like that. And would hold myself so strictly to these rules and strictures. And, when I was young, I developed this friend group at a very, very young age. And so they became part of my core identity. Like friendship was so deeply entrenched in me as part of my core identity. And that's just how that was, to the point that it overshadowed like family, that oftentimes it was codependent, and things that friends said about me would become part of my identity. Like if a friend called me evil, or if a friend called me selfish, then I would just say, okay, well, I guess that's the kind of person that I am. And the thing about me is I'm strong, but I'm sensitive, and I'm sensitive, but I'm strong. So I won't let you know that you basically just hurt my heart, but I will take it on and I'll keep it and I'll hold on to that. And I'm thinking, because these are people that I love so intensely and say that they love me so intensely, that if they say it, it must be so. And it's those little things that you pick up along the way too. Like when I was in high school, I was in ROTC, and I had gotten to the highest position in ROTC. And I had left for the summer break, and when I came back from summer break, they just decided they wanted to restructure the whole organization and replace me. Basically I got fired. And the reasons they were citing for firing me was just wild to me and stuff like that. Or you don't get, cheer captain when you're in 7th grade. All this little stuff. And you start blocking things off. Okay, well, I took on that failure in that way, or I took on that unsuccess in that way, or the world hates me for this reason. And those just become part of who you are, and you don't really challenge them because they're happening in times when you're just trying to figure out what even are you and what's your identity, where do you belong. And so all that's happening. Or let's say I experienced a trauma that was sexual in nature, and it was from someone I really trusted and someone in my family. And I didn't tell anybody in my family. I told friends. I told my ex, ended up dating my ex again because, he was there for me in that moment where I needed something and I needed somebody. But I never told my family. And I always felt like such a hypocrite, because I felt like if it had happened to anybody else, I would have told them why are you protecting this person? You were violated. You were the most important individual in the situation. I would have just went to bat for it. And the thing about my strength and my sensitivity is I told myself oh, well, I handled it. That conversation with my ex about it, took care of it. I got it. And, it's not that I'm protecting him so much as I'm protecting the family and don't want the family to have any issues, and I'm strong enough to carry it. So I got it. And I've done that a lot of times in my life where I've just been okay, well, I got it. It'll be fine. And, that was tough. And because I always think I got it, I spent a lot of years thinking it was handled until my anger issues not got out of control, but they definitely got woken up. And I just thought of myself as this angry person. I just thought I had this monster in me. And that's just who I was. And in some ways, yeah, I do have Like, I'm not to be trifled with, right? But in other ways, some of that anger was just there because of the pain I was experiencing and the pain that I was feeling and the silence and how hard I was on myself. Like, I was hard on myself because I was like, oh, this thing happened to me and I didn't stop it. I didn't speak up. I didn't say, you know what I'm saying? And I did, but it's like, oh, you didn't say it fast enough. Like, you can't blame anybody for the bad things that happened to you because you shouldn't have allowed the bad things that happened to you to happen. And that wasn't fair, but because I am built in a way, or have been built in a way where I like have this superhero martyr complex where I have to be strong, but I also have to take on the weight of everything. That's just how that was. And so, you know, I've had to go to therapy a couple of times because all of my defense mechanisms are like perfectly crafted to make me think I'm good. Anyway, so back to the friend stuff, right? So like the friendship was so deeply entrenched in my personality that even when it was toxic, even when I was being toxic, maybe toxic's not necessarily the right word, but I think we were just kids trying to figure out how to deal with who we were as people, and we didn't always do it in healthy ways. Let me say it like that. So when those friendships collapsed or dissolved, I took that on, and I took it on as part of my identity. Like, something was wrong with me. I wasn't keepable. Going back in my mind and trying to figure out, like, what did I do that was so bad that people who said they would love me forever just left in like messy and unresolved ways. And I held on to that for a long time. I'm still dealing with that, you know. And it's, you know, those things that you have happened when you're little too, right? Where you take on certain things that didn't even have anything to do with you, really. Like, when I was a kid, my sister left. Well, she's my cousin, but my mama raised her like she was my sister. She left. Just one day we came home and all of her stuff was out of her room and the mattress was leaned against the wall. And that's how I thought college worked. That's how I thought college worked until I was like in middle school. That people just leave. You just come home and they're gone. And, you know, when you're like 4 or 5 year old mind, you're like, it must like have been me, or something must have been not in me that someone could feel comfortable, who was part of your life, who had loved you so intensely that they could just leave without a word. And so it was years and some therapy before I realized that I had abandonment issues and rejection issues. You take on other stuff, like, say you have perfectionist issues, because I have some perfectionist issues where, you know, because certain things that, you know, my dad said growing up, where if I would like show up with a B, it's like, well, why isn't it an A? Or if I showed up with the A, it's like, well, why isn't it 100? And so it was never really good enough for me. Nothing was ever good enough for me. I was always like let's say I just finished like a degree. My mind was already thinking about what was the next degree that I was going to get. And you just take all of this stuff, and so then you feel like insatiable and you feel broken. You know, and a big thing in my life is that things will pop back up, right? Like, if there's something that I find profoundly triggering, that she will show up again. Like, I'll tell you about those friends, right? And so I would get these huge text messages, like novels of text messages, condemning me, basically being like, you know, I'm mad at you for this reason. Or they would be in my life and we would be happy and we would be good, and then they come back and be like, okay, I need to talk to you. I'm mad at you for this thing that happened like a couple years ago. And it's like, wait a second. First off, we already talked about that thing that happened a couple years ago. what am I supposed to do about something that happened a couple years ago now? Two, we were just hanging out, seeming fine. So it feels like there was something, like, were you faking? Like, what's going on that you've been in my life and were in my life, and now you're telling me that you've been resentful like this whole time, or mad this whole time? And like, if you were, why would you wait this long to tell me you were upset, where it's too late for me to do anything about it, and you already sowing your feelings that we are at like a really crucial impasse, so that would happen. And so I started thinking, okay, well, it must be me. Like, I must be difficult to talk to, or just, stuff like that. And you don't really realize that sometimes people's stuff is just people's stuff, and they put that stuff onto you. Now, you probably did do something wrong in the beginning, but at the same time, if somebody brings it up to you so far in advance, I'm sorry, not in advance, in retrospect, is that right? In the future, how about that? Then what are you supposed to do about that? So back to the novels of text messages. So I'll get these huge novels, and they would come out of nowhere. And when I say that, what I mean is not that I didn't know that there was an issue, but like, we wouldn't be talking for months on end. And I'm not that kind of person. I like being in pretty consistent communication with people, because I just feel like otherwise, how are you supposed to know what's going on in people's lives? Like, it just breaks my heart that you could be going through the hardest thing of your life, and you feel alone and no one's there for you because you didn't communicate that you were going through something, or you dipped out of my life, and now I don't feel safe enough to tell you that I'm going through something, so I feel alone. And so you got this life full of people, and you going through life by yourself. Like, that was just always wild and hurtful to me, or heartbreaking. Let me say that, heartbreaking to me. So I would get these novels, and they'd be like, I'm mad at you about this thing that happened 10 months ago. Or calling me selfish or whatever. And you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to let it be. I'm not going to say anything mean. I'm not going to say anything hurtful in return. I'm assuming that they'll be back and we'll talk about it. And, I can hear them out. They can hear me out, because we have a relationship, and that's how relationships are supposed to work. And it doesn't always go like that. Sometimes, you'll want for things to be okay, and you'll want for things to be good, and you're like, well, let me just take it, right? Let me just take the hurtful words. Let me take the silence. Let me take the, them not giving me the benefit of the doubt, them not extending the opportunities for us to actually have a conversation about it. Like, one time I had a friend who we hadn't spoken in months, and I don't know where she came back. She was like, hey, let's have a conversation. I was like, great, right? Like, let's have a conversation. It's been forever since we've talked. Let's do it. And we get on the phone, and she spends like 10, 15 minutes calling me toxic, saying, all this stuff. And all this stuff is stuff from like high school, or stuff we've talked about, stuff that I've explained myself about. And there's just this unforgiveness, and then she's like, I don't even want to be your friend anymore. And it's like, wait, you came back into my life to talk to me rough, just to tell me you don't want to be my friend anymore? And so I got mad, and I tried to have the conversation as whole and healed and as Christian as I could, but I didn't completely succeed in that regard. I did get upset. I did say some things that, weren't the kindest things in the world, and I held on to that, and I felt bad about that. So that was rough, or I have this thing where, like, sometimes men will come in, boys will come in and out of my life, and they'll be like, oh man, like, I miss you. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe let's just be friends, because last time this didn't work out so well. And they say, okay. And then they don't want to be friends. And then they'll eventually, once I start letting my guard down again, because they've been back a while and they're saying the right things, then, they peace out again. And so I'm, from all of these experiences and collecting this information about myself, where it's like, okay, well, I'm not somebody that like people keep. I'm somebody that people change their mind about pretty consistently. That people, will love me for something in the beginning, like being outspoken, being self-determined, being self-assured, and then eventually will villainize those same characteristics. I'm somebody that people just feel like they don't have to forgive, they don't protect, they don't care for consistently, all this stuff. What I will say that I have figured out is that my superhero martyr complex has made it so that a lot of times somebody will do something to me that I feel like is unkind or hurtful. And then I'll be holding onto this thing, or like not able to like let it go, not able to move past it. Like my heart will still be hurting about it years later and all this other stuff. It's like, well, what is it? And then, I figured out very, very recently, some of it is just the fact that I didn't forgive myself, right? Like I was like, okay, well maybe I'm not as forgiving as I thought, because I'm still bothered by the stuff that happened with these people in the past. And it's like, no, I don't think so. I don't think I'm holding on to it so much because I'm upset at these people in my past, because like I was able to forgive the family member who did like, the trauma thing to me and all this other stuff. And I was really good at letting people back into my life and all this stuff. So I was like, I really don't think that I'm not forgiving. And I had to think about it, and I was like, it's because I don't forgive myself. I don't forgive myself for allowing myself to be hurt. I don't forgive myself for allowing myself to be in a situation where somebody had like that much access to me, or for not seeing it coming, or for doing the thing that somebody like kicks me out of their life for. Like recently, that sister cousin, she came in and out of my life really, really often, and when she's in your life, it's amazing. Like biggest cheerleader, so supportive. And then, either she'll get mad at me or she'll get mad at life or whatever, and then she'll go back into her home. Recently, in the last year, not recently, we had a falling out, because I wanted to come visit her. It didn't end up working out that I was going to be able to. And she went off on me. Like, sent me a whole text messages about how I'm selfish, about all the stuff that she's done for me, that I, never really reciprocated, all this stuff. And it was like, dang, like, you've been holding that for how long? Like, what's going on that it'll be like that? And that happens really consistently, where I will just be living my life, just trying to love people the best that I can. And I'm not perfect at it, but I do the best that I can. And then out of nowhere, I get these like massive attacks, is what it feels like. And I take those on, and I take those on as my identity. And I don't react badly in the situation. I just like accept it, or I'll say my little piece to try to be as honest as I can, while also being like kind and Christian about it. But then I'll be dealing with it for like years on end, still having dreams about these people, all this stuff. And, I feel like I had never really actually talked about the things that I carry. And I just kind of want to finish this up with saying that I'm sick of these patterns in my life. But regardless, I'm going to let God use them, and I'm going to let God teach me through them. And I feel like God has shown me so many times that my identity can't rest in people, that people's love and celebration of you can be a fickle thing. It can be a complicated thing, that sometimes people will demean you or hurt your heart just because their hearts are hurting, just because they're overwhelmed in life. Like, I think I have tendency to just be in relationship with people that their crisis coping skills, like if their life is in crisis, they either like burrow into their own little holes or they lash out. And some of that's probably like behavioral patterns. Like I'm used to that kind of behavior from growing up with it, so I just attract that to myself. And then I heard in a sermon that sometimes you are attracted to people who you are trying to fix, or like bringing strays home. I've heard people say that I like bring strays home. I never felt that way, but I understand why someone would feel that way, because I am always trying to like better people and fix people. But yeah, that you do it because you need to be needed and you want to feel undisposable. And that's wild too. But anyway, like I said, I want to bring it home by saying that I'm in a season of my life that I don't want. It's transitional. This is a transitional season of my life. And I want this season to serve a purpose. I want to speak honestly. I want to be whole and healed. I want to let God use the places that I've been hurt to help me grow into a better, kinder, more loving, smarter person, more giving person, more self-assured person. And I want to surrender those things that I took on that maybe weren't mine to carry, or they were just for that season, like just to get you to the next thing, and you keep dragging that stuff with you. And so I'm really working on the forgiveness bit, forgiving the people, forgiving myself for being like, dang, you should have been over this. This was too much time. And really just trying to believe that like I'm right where I'm supposed to be. I'm right in the part of my healing that I'm supposed to be in. I'm right in the part of my like relationship developments that I'm supposed to be in. I'm right in the part of my growth that I'm supposed to be in. And so that's where I am. So I just wanted to share that because I've never really talked about all these things before, because I was like, I don't want people to think I have like they have one up on me, or that I'm weak, or whatever it was. And if you want something new, you got to do something new. So that's what I'm doing. All right, lovies, y'all have a good one.